Chapter 4. The Fens. Past the western gate, the solid streets of An Lung became mud, and then even the mud disappeared, melting into the marshy waterways of the fens. The only way to get across the swamp was either by boat or along the floating bamboo walkways that snaked through the tall, reedy grass. The bamboo bridge swayed from side to side as I jogged across it. My ears pricked up and my eyes scanned my surroundings. I held one fist around the coins in my pocket so they wouldn't jingle. I needed to hurry and get out of my nice clothes. The fens were what was left of the marshland at the mouth of the river Hama. Way back before that mythical queen popped out of her golden egg, this was where Menkon began. Centuries ago, it was probably a nice place to start a civilization. Our people built their homes on rafts that drifted among the reeds and lotus blossoms. They let their babies nap in floating baskets tied to lily pads while they fished for paper-skin shrimp. No one let babies float in the water now unless they didn't want them back. Once we dammed the river Hama to bring fresh water into the city, the fens became too salty for anything but the mangor trees. The people beat them back with machetes and hammers every year, but while we slept, they crept toward us on their roots. Every kid who grew up in the fens was told to stay out of the water or the mangors would pull them under and drink their blood. One benefit of those creepy stories was that no one was going to go poking their noses around mangor roots looking for money. I followed my usual route along the maze of creaky walkways. It was still early enough in the evening that I didn't see anyone other than the odd fisherman wrestling with his trap of slurpy eels. But you never knew who you might run into in the fens, so I hurried on until I got to the old mangor whose roots held my hiding spot. After checking over my shoulder, I slipped off my shoes and tucked them into my apron. I climbed off the walkway and onto the roots, clutching them with my toes. Ugly scars crossed the tree's thick trunk, making it easy to grip. On the far side of the tree, I was hidden from sight. A deep crevice in the trunk held a rice sack where I kept my regular clothes. Getting changed was the tricky part. The mangor had thick, sturdy roots, but one slip and I'd end up in the black water. It was nearly dark now, so I worked by feel to change out of my stiff clothes and into my tattered pants and tunic. As I folded up my assistant's uniform and put the clothes away, I cringed to think about how much money I could get if I sold it. But it was out of the question. I couldn't make money in the first place until I dressed the part. I braced my shoulder against the mangor, reached my hand deep into the crevice, and pulled out the square candy tin that held my money. I let it bounce in my palm. It was deliciously heavy, but even after half a year of saving, still not heavy enough. This had been a one-of-a-kind year. As 12-year-olds, all assistants in An Lung were on equal footing, or at least we pretended to be. But the little differences in our status, the type of shoes we wore, the number of sweets we could buy at the candy shop, would soon give way to the glaringly obvious ones as we began turning 13 and starting school. The wealthy among us would go to private conservatories. Middle-class kids would go to public academies. I couldn't afford either one. Some schools gave scholarships to good families who fell on hard times, but of course that required a lineal as proof that you were a worthy investment. How long would Master Payun let me keep working in his shop? I couldn't pretend to keep being 12 forever. He'd eventually ask me why I hadn't started school, or why I didn't have my lineal yet. I wouldn't be able to lie about my situation much longer, and then people would start to whisper, "The Master Mapmaker has a fens rat as his assistant?" It would be too embarrassing for him, too embarrassing for me. Without Payun, without a diploma, and with no lineal to help dazzle my way through a job interview, the best I could hope for was to go back to the harbor market and deliver shrimp for the rest of my life. I shook my head to banish the thought, swishing my hair hard enough that my braids slapped my eyes. The money in my tin couldn't get me into school, but I had started to believe it might at least get me out of the fens. Ferry boats left the harbor all the time for the other 8 islands. I could buy a ticket to snowy Koh Tang or Koh Sulin, where I could get a job on a pretty little farm, somewhere no one knew me. Good luck had shone on me with my assistantship. Maybe it would shine on me again. The last light in the sky was fading. Time to stop daydreaming. I counted out 15 leks from my wages and put the rest in the tin before sliding it back into place. The sky was black by the time I tiptoed back to the walkways and made my way to Down Island, the fen's one plot of solid land. Once I'd heard the other assistant say that the people from the fens smelled bad because Down Island used to be Mancon's trash heap, but they were wrong. I had checked. I'd spent an entire Sunday down a back alley digging a deep hole, and all I ever found was dirt and water. Besides, I didn't smell bad. Tall wooden buildings crowded one another for space, creating a warren of tight alleys. Doors on either side of me began to swing open, and I heard the usual sounds of the island waking up for the night. Squid fishermen's boots thudding toward their boats, the clink of the bottle collectors' bags. The thumping of piano keys meant I was nearing the rooster room. The glow from the fire lit up the bar's windows. Inside, customers howled the words to a popular drinking song. On the front steps, a group of men squatted around a dice game. I walked a little closer, scanning their faces, but the person I was looking for wasn't there. A boy wearing a rumpled cap looked up and locked eyes with me. A jagged scar trailed from underneath the cap to the middle of his eyebrows. Startled, I took a step back, and the coins in my pocket clattered. Mistake. I turned and hurried away, hoping no one else had heard, but footsteps sounded behind me, matching my stride. I cut around a corner and slipped into a long alley. I counted 100 paces, then glanced over my shoulder. The boy with the cap had turned the corner after me. He was just a kid, but almost twice my size, with broad, thick shoulders. He must have heard the jingle of money in my pocket. I was close to home now, but I didn't dare run. I turned another corner, then quickly ducked into a doorway. As I flattened myself against the door, the boy passed by. I waited for him to disappear down the alley before stepping back out. I peered ahead into the alley, but didn't see him. Suddenly, I felt the darkness stir behind me. Before I could run, thick arms encircled my body. They pinned my biceps to my ribs, squeezing the air from my lungs. "All your money. Now!" demanded a gruff voice. A surge of panic rolled through my stomach. My reflexes kicked in. I flapped my elbows like wings, forcing the boy's grip to slide up to my shoulders. Before he could tighten his hold on me, I dropped to a squat at his feet. I reached through my legs and grabbed his ankle. I sat back against his leg, hard, throwing all my weight into his kneecap. He cried out as he lost his balance and crashed to the ground. I was already into a sprint when I heard a familiar hoarse laugh behind me. "Ha ha, just like I showed ya." Coughs and more rough laughter rose from the dirt. "That's how a small girl brings a big man down. You do that move better'n me, Cy girl." I whirled around. The blood still pumped in my ears, and it took me a second to find my words. It wasn't the boy after all. "Mud," I said, panting. "I should have known that was you." The man rubbed his leg as he called into the shadows. "Hear that, catfish? The girl ought to be thanking me for teaching her how to protect herself. But I don't even get a hello. How's that for manners?" A small man in a tattered jacket stepped out from behind a pile of crates. He clucked his tongue. "Kids today are as spoiled as old pumpkins. It's a real disgracement." An acid taste rose in my mouth when I saw Catfish. I knew why he was here. I almost turned around and walked away from them, but now my adrenaline was gone, and I felt completely drained. I needed to sit down. Wearily, I followed Mud and Catfish up a wooden staircase to the second floor of our building. Halfway up, I patted my hip. I gasped and reached into my pocket. It was empty. Mud turned to me, laughing. He held out a hand full of coins and winked. "Still got my touch. Let's get home, Cy."